And now it's Boomer Life. Lifestyle ideas designed to make your life more engaging, meaningful, and complete. Celebrating the baby boomer generation, this is Boomer Life with Sterling Fox.
Oh, and quite a parade of guests we have on today's episode of Boomer Life. Friends, you picked a good one to tune into as we're talking about retirement living with the folks from Revera Retirement Living. Lydia Miller is Revera's Regional Director of Sales for British Columbia, all of those Revera communities around our province. Yep. And we have a couple more guests from Parkwood Manor in Coquitlam. Now, in our last segment, we heard from Gwen, who lives at Parkwood Manor, and her daughter, Anita, who is delighted that Gwen lives at Parkwood Manor. Now, in the studio with us now are Lynn and Ron Grender, here to talk about, well, in Gwen's case, she informed her daughters that she was going to move to this retirement community, and off they went, and everything just was just tickety-boo. Yep. And, well, it's not always like that. In fact, Lynn and Ron, first of all, welcome, and thanks for coming in.
It's a pleasure.
And Gwen's story is... and Lydia, you hear them all. Yep. She is in the minority in terms of seniors who come to retirement communities like Parkwood Manor.
To make the move,
and Lynn and Ron, I think, represent typical boomer kids who've had more than a little trouble convincing parents, in your case, that a retirement community might even be a viable option.
That's
Lynn?
Right. A challenge with a happy ending, I guess is how you might put it.
But a real Donnybrook in the process, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Your mom wasn't in the least bit interested.
I have learned a lot.
So tell us the story. When did this come up? When did the notion that your mom and dad might consider moving to a retirement community? How long ago was that?
Well, let's just quickly say, first off, my mom has lived in her family home for 67 years.
Okay.
And her neighborhood was very important to her. My second dad lived there in the same neighborhood in 31 years. They loved their house, they loved the big ravine, they loved the garden. And so we kind of celebrated that even in their late 80s, they were independent.
Right.
And isn't that just terrific?
Right.
But very soon, Dad began to stumble in the garden, or he would miss a tread on the stairwell, and I was beginning to get more and more calls. John's had a bit of a tumble. He's just fine. How soon can you come over? I was already, helping them in their very late 80s and early 90s with the Wednesday shopping, medical, hair, blah, blah, blah.
Can I interrupt you only to find out if you were doing this alone or were there siblings as well?
I have a twin sister, and I also have who I call an Irish sister. But, you always think I'm the firstborn twin, so... Hello.
The eldest daughter does, in many of these cases, and Lydia, we've talked about this, the eldest daughter frequently bears the most weight in these.
Well, Mom had a touch tone, so of course she hit one first.
Speed dial.
Yeah, that's right.
We live in Coquitlam. They lived in South Burnaby on a very steep hill, and as fall approached, we used to get paranoid about snow removal because it's not that great in Burnaby. Sorry, Burnaby, it's not.
I live in New West, and it's not great there either.
And so, can we get there? If they need us, can we get there? So for 2.5 years prior to the December in which they were hustled in, it's like, I've heard of this place and they have free lunches, so why don't we go? And I very soon after the 5th or 6th outing and lunch saw that my mom saw these kind of as an outing, so she was being proactive but never could make a commitment.
So the lunches, were you having lunches at different retirement communities, kind of trying them on for size, doing a little tire kicking?
Yeah, we were.
Oh, okay. So was this
good for her?
Right.
Good for them.
Okay, so you had at least convinced them that they should consider it to the point where they'd go have a lunch somewhere.
I think it was an activity.
Oh, okay.
And it got better through the winter months than it did in the spring when they could be out in the yard and the garden.
It's like going to a restaurant,
Exactly.
with no commitments.
Right, okay.
And no tip.
Yeah.
So how long did this go on until you figured out, Well, we're playing a game here. Nobody's really not terribly interested in anything other than lunches at as many different spots as we can pick
Honey,
out.
I've heard of this place in Westminster. Mom, you've already seen 8. If you
Right.
can't narrow down the 8, we are not going to see 9. Oh, ridiculous. I'll ask your sister. So that's the way it went until Dad's health started failing a little bit. Right, Ron?
Yeah, and it wasn't just Lynn going out for the lunches. Her Irish sister would go out for lunches as well. Her twin sister would go out for lunches as well. So
Right.
Mom and John were getting a lot of free lunches.
Right, but also at least being exposed to a number of retirement community options around town.
But then a terrible long list of why that is not the place.
Right. Okay.
And always, especially from John, the belief that he was going to get better, that his problems with balance, if he just walked more, he was determined to get better. He was determined to continue to do the things he'd always done.
Right.
And so getting to the point of actually making the decision to even try Parkwood Manor on a trial basis for 2 weeks was very, very difficult to get them to make that commitment.
Because it would seem to him, in that case, to be surrendering
giving
his
up.
fight to improve his health.
That's right. That's right. It was a giving up your and again back to the conversation we had earlier about losing your right to drive.
Right.
That was a huge challenge for John, and that didn't happen until his early 90s. And so, lack of balance, lack of mobility. He had a stair climber in the home that helped him a lot, but balance was a huge issue. Falling. We were getting called to travel into Burnaby General to see how he was doing because he'd been taken by ambulance.
Oh, boy.
And he had internal bleeding and this and that. So a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety on our part about their safety, less concern about that from them,
Yeah.
I hate to say.
Because you were there to help support them and take care of it.
Yeah. So things kept going along. Everything was going well in their frame of mind. Then he had a terrible fall, and we invited the whole family to come in and had a little intervention and said, this is it. You are grieving what was, not what could be.
Right.
And the neighborhood that you once enjoyed and had so much stimulation, friendship, that no longer exists. Those people have gone, they have passed, or they have moved, and people no longer even speak English for the most part in your neighborhood. And we are worried sick. You're not eating well. You're splitting some of the food company meals that are being brought in, or halving the M&Ms, and we could see that both of them were losing weight.
Right.
So when Parkwood said, hey, we've seen these people before, they keep circling, how about Christmas time is a magical time. Why don't you come and just let them have 2 weeks at Christmas, and I think they're going to be sold. So we worked on it at that basis. My sister was going away for a month, and so they bought into the 2 weeks.
Oh, they did.
Yes.
Was that
And they enjoyed
that a root canal thing, or did they?
well, that
were
was
they
a mini
fairly...
vacation. That was lovely.
No. So, I see, because it wasn't a commitment beyond 2 weeks. Okay, so they were good with 2 weeks. And how did the 2 weeks go?
Those 2 weeks went well, except, it'll be nice to get back home. It'll be nice to do this. And we kept saying, that's not really what happens at home. Remember, this is what really happens
Right.
at home.
Except we had already established power of attorney, and that was another thing that we did way too late. We did it only recently, within the last year. Should have been done 10 or 15 years ago, really. We went one Saturday morning to advise Mom and John that we were going to visit their financial institution and review their personal finances,
Right.
to be certain that they had enough money to support them in making this decision, if there was a decision to stay at Parkwood Manor.
Reasonable.
We were accused of, well, it's almost like kidnapping, was the comment John made. He says, I know what's going on now. It's like kidnapping. And he was really, really angry. And it took some effort on my part to try to get him calmed down and reassured that it wasn't kidnapping and they could go anytime they wanted and all that stuff. So it was a good 2 weeks, but it wasn't a perfect 2 weeks.
No.
As Sterling might put it, we would not lock them up and throw away the
No.
key.
Well, no,
No.
that's it. But so why the resistance? I'm starting to understand John's perspective here with the health issues and the desire to fight, to just to fight the good fight, Ron, if nothing else. But in your mom's case, Lynn, why did she dig in her heels so deeply against even the idea of a retirement community lifestyle?
She had to put her own parents into 2 different homes, which in that generational was less than desirable. And while she trip-trapped through these other 12 establishments, could never see herself leaving what she believed was her home. And it was only when I came for yet another lunch, and I came through the doors and I said, "Mom, you've come home. This is like home. Like, what more could you possibly want?" Had the most fantastic lunch. 2 choices, 2 entrees for lunch, 2 entrees for dinner. I don't even tell Ron now if I have lunch what it was that he missed, because I'm not going to whip up those kinds of meals. Everything fresh, everything on site.
Right.
And I just knew that their health was going to get increasingly better, because their nutrition base was getting better, the stimulation, the entertainment. I want to live there.
What about energy levels and activities for them? Are they seeing more and more to do and options?
They are. Well, my dad actually passed while at Parkwood, and I have to say, God bless these people. They went above and beyond to make sure that my dad was so comfortable and that every need was met. Not part of their job descriptions, but they did it with care and with empathy and patience. And I would say that now the happy ending is that my mom sees that she could not go back home, that she could not live there. She sees the reality, and I've told her, "You put me through the worst 5 months of my life."
Right.
And she says, "At this point, all I can tell you is I'm so sorry.
Right.
I love the people here. I'm making new neighbors," which is interesting.
What was it? Was it in some ways with both of them, and you can speak to John, Ron, as well? Was it just fear of the unknown, or a fear of making a change? Because there's a lot of fear in that vigorous a defense.
Losing autonomy.
Yeah. Okay.
Losing autonomy.
Yeah, fear of change, losing autonomy. And I think we have to keep in mind that both of these individuals were raised in the Depression. Even though there is no financial concerns for them in terms of staying at Parkwood Manor, there was real concern on their part about whether it could be affordable, whether they could do it.
Well, I meant to ask you, because you did exercise the power of attorney, and you did go to the financial institution and examine the books. So clearly, the affordability factor was fine. It was manageable.
And the comments made earlier about it being almost a saw-off if you're paying property taxes and maintenance on your home, those comments are true in our case as well.
Because of the assisted living costs with people coming in to help out, and
if you can
it does add up, doesn't it?
If you can afford to live in a home in Greater Vancouver, you can afford to live at Parkwood Manor or one of the other
And it's
locations.
opened our eyes too. It's opened our eyes as to what we want to do when we and
oh, now isn't that interesting? Now, this is the first time that this has come around, Lydia, because we've sort of been focused on our parents, and this is Boomer Life, and Lynn and Ron are boomers like you and I are, and here you are, having just gone through this experience with your folks, all of a sudden realizing, well, maybe they left it until too late.
Absolutely.
But we're not going to.
Absolutely.
We're saying the right things. Whether we do the right things or not will remain to be seen, but we're saying now that maybe we're going to have to start thinking about a change long before we would have once thought. I once thought I would live in the family home we're in until the day I died.
Right, sure, of course.
Well,
don't we all?
Ditto.
That may not be the best choice.
No.
Right, and Lynn,
especially when you see the options.
Right.
When you see the options that a place like Parkwood can offer. Why would I downsize to a small condo with a tiny balcony and not know my neighbors and still be dependent on others for shopping and medical and all the rest of it.
Right, and I think the point that, and we need to take a break because Dwayne's getting a little agitated. But before we go, the whole matter of being the prisoner in your own house. You talked earlier about how they were convinced in their home in Burnaby that they were still living independently. We're handling it all very well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Until somebody falls down or needs to go to the hairdresser or the supermarket
Yeah.
or anywhere.
My dog didn't even recognize me in those later months because I was home so seldom. Like, who is she?
But isn't it interesting how all this experience of finally accommodating and settling your folks has actually caused you to sort of look a little ahead and maybe end up being
future planning,
being in that 97% of the survey group at one point down the road who doesn't say, I only regret not having come here early, because you will have come at the right time and had a good time.
I see people that are locking the door and heading for Mexico, knowing that their house is safe and that there'll be fresh sheets and a beautiful meal when they come back from their vacation. And I say, by golly, that looks very good to me.
Right.
Yeah. So I think, Sterling, anyone with parents who are elderly, any boomers with elderly parents, if they're not already working towards some long-term thinking and long-term planning, should be. And even for ourselves, we should be thinking a lot longer term than we have been, and examining what the options are and what the various pitfalls might be of trying to stay in your home. We can learn an awful lot. And it's not that there's a lack of information out there. We're all so busy we don't pursue it until we absolutely need to.
Well, and then we hear stories from people like you, and thank you so much for coming in to share them with us, because it's only because of people like you and your experience that remind all of us that we too could be next.
Hang in there.
Exactly.
It will work out.
But sometimes the fight can be pretty stiff. They can put up some serious resistance to the whole retirement living notion.
And we have to say that Parkwood Manor staff, Parkwood Manor management, Parkwood Manor residents, the other residents, are all so supportive of anyone that comes in there. It really is remarkable to watch.
Back with more on Boomer Life here on AM 650 after this.
It's all about the baby boomer lifestyle. Boomer Life on AM 650.